Hi there, this is Unmesh, and today we're going to be talking about Photoshop basics, and this is strictly for beginners. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to learn is how to open a file. Okay, pretty basic stuff, but very important thing. If you are doing Photoshop for the first time, this is really important. How to open a file, pretty basic. So what do? Just let's go ahead and close this photo. When you open Photoshop for the first time, all you have to do, you have to go to File, Open, or use the shortcut Controller Command O. Now let me give you a tip, and the tip is this. If you want to remember, if you want to know shortcut to anything, all you have to do, you just look at the right hand side and you can see what? The shortcut, okay? And one of the keys of mastering Photoshop or any other software, if you really want to be professional in that, remember the shortcuts, okay? So go to File, Open. Now, once you go to File, Open, you can locate the image that you want. Just select any image that you want. These are just my gallery, one of the images that I clicked last year, and just start working on it. It's already open. Now, how to close it? Just click on the close button and it gets closed down. Make sure you save it before you close. But do I open images this way? No, I don't. I personally, here's what I do. I go to the folder that I want, locate the image that I want. Because I can even make it larger or smaller, do what I want, just drag it and drop it into Photoshop. That's what I do. Isn't that easier? Okay, you guys have any questions in between, just make sure you ask that. Okay, so if you're using Lightroom, there's a different step involved. Okay, most of you guys, I usually did a class with one of you, and she knew Lightroom very well, but she was not aware of Photoshop. She didn't know a thing about Photoshop. So if you're using Lightroom, here's what you need to do. So Lightroom, we are already in Lightroom with a photo. By the way, this photo was taken by Jim Smith from James 4 Photography. Thank you, Jim, for this photo. So all you have to do, you have to right click. If your mouse has a right click button, right click on it and go to Edit In and choose Adobe Photoshop CC 2017. Or you can also go to Photo, Edit In, Adobe Photoshop CC 2017. Just click on that and it will open itself in Photoshop. Okay. Now you need to shift to Lightroom when you want to do something that doesn't exist in Lightroom. So there are a lot of things. 95% of the time I'm done with my images in Lightroom, but that 5%, when you want to fix something, then we move to Photoshop. For example, in this photo, there's nothing to fix, but again, I'll show you. For example, her jaw was sticking out. For example, I'm just saying Amanda is beautiful. Amanda, don't take it to your heart. Okay, here's what you need to do. Go to Filter, Liquify, and we'll get to that. Don't worry about it. This is some advanced stuff, but there's a difference. So once we are in Liquify, suppose you want to bring the jaw a little bit to the inside. This looks awful, but okay, so you want to take everything a little inside, just like that. Maybe make the hair a little expanded, just like that. Take this in. Whatever you want to do, you do. Take the nose in or whatever. Click OK once you're satisfied. And then once you're fine with the photo, once you have done the necessary changes, all you have to do, if you have opened your file from Lightroom, all you have to do, you have to go File, Save, not Save As, Save. And once you click Save, let's do something dramatic so that it becomes visible. So for example, I was applying say color lookup, something like this. Okay, this effect, Kodak, this effect, or maybe late sunset. Okay, something like this. This is not something I would apply to this photo, but then again, in case you want to apply this, let's apply something else. I'm just not satisfied with this. Fall colors, foggy night. Okay, for example, we are applying this thing. And then all you have to do, you have to go to File, Save, not Save As, Save. And when you click Save and it's finished saving, you'll just notice that when you open Lightroom and it gets automatically loaded up in Lightroom. Have a look. It's loading that photo. See, with all the changes I did in Photoshop, it just comes back to Lightroom. So that was about Lightroom. But if you're not using Lightroom, if you're directly opening something into Photoshop, let's go ahead and close it. Skip this time. Let's go ahead and close that. If you're not using Lightroom, let me just go ahead and close this. Okay, if you're doing something to this photo, all you have to do, you have to go to File, Save As. Okay, Save As. Now once you click on Save As, you have a couple of bunch of options here which might confuse you. So this is the file name that you want to keep your image in. For example, I have kept it time 1, let's say time 1, and this is type JPEG, PNG. What format do you want to save it as? If you want to retain the transparency, you might want to save it as a PNG, but if your image doesn't have any kind of transparency, then JPEG is the key. Also, if you want to, for example, if you're working on a project, okay, and you want to save that, and you want to start the project and start from that exact moment where you left off, and you want to make some changes, so you want to save the whole project. That time you want to save it as a PSD. Now PSD is a file which will only be opened by Photoshop software. Okay, all right. So okay, so PSD is the Photoshop file which can only be opened by Photoshop. It will keep all your adjustments that you did intact. JPEG, you know what JPEG is. You can directly share it into Facebook, get it printed, and social media, do all that stuff. PNG can also be shared, but it is great for retaining transparency. Now, what do I mean by transparency? Let's just go ahead and understand that. For example, I go ahead, create a logo. Let's create a new document. So create a new file new. We'll learn how to create a new document. So let me go ahead and create any new file, doesn't really matter. And if I just create a logo really quickly, just like, thank you. Okay, so for example, this is my logo, and by the way, this white checker box means nothing. It means that the thing is transparent. Thing is transparent. So this is your logo. Okay, this is, thank you. And let's just color it something, because otherwise you won't be able to understand what it is. Let's just color it, say red. Okay, now I'm going to save this. Go to File. Let's just save this. Go to File. Save as. I'm going to save this as a PNG. So I'm going to choose PNG. There we go. And in the desktop, I'm going to save it as TQ. Let's save it. Okay, click OK. And then I'm going to save the same file as a JPEG. Let me show you the difference. File, save as JPEG. In the desktop, name TQ. J. Let's just say TQJ. That's pretty fine. Save it at that. Okay. Now we have two files, TQ and TQ JPEG. One as a PNG, one as a JPEG. Let me just close that. Now, if I go to my desktop, okay, let me just go to my desktop. If I just go to my desktop and open up the JPEG file and open it up above this image, it opens it up with the white background, which means that JPEG does not support what? Transparency. But if I go ahead and open this one up, where did that go? I mean, I think I saved it right here. Yeah, there we go. So if I open this one, the PNG one, watch what happens. It is transparent. Let me just turn. It is transparent. It doesn't come with a white background. So that's the difference between PNG and JPEG. I just wanted you to know. Okay, so if you want to save a file, that's the way. Also, there's another way which is more intuitive, more better. So while you're saving a file, let me just show you. Okay, so go to File, Export, Export As. That's another way of saving a file. It also gives you a bunch of options which are very important for social media. Okay, if you go to Export As, you get a bunch of options. And these are available only in the later versions of Photoshop. So in Export As, your image gets loaded here. You can change the dimensions of the photo. Suppose you're uploading it to Facebook. Now Facebook's right now, the best dimensions for Facebook is it should have a width of 2048 pixels. Okay, so I'm gonna just type 2048. That's best for Facebook. You gotta find out what's best for your social media and just type it in. Also, one essential thing which others don't do is that make sure you convert this image into sRGB color space. Everything which is on the screen, sRGB is the color space for it. If you go for Pro Photo RGB color space, colors will change. You might have noticed when you open your photos to Facebook or Instagram, the colors change, totally change. Even if you're watching on the same screen, the colors change. Why do they change? Because you are using another color space. So this Export As option gives, Export As dialog box gives you the option of converting this to sRGB while you're saving this. So make sure anything on the web, anything on the screen, anything which is going for the screen, make sure you convert that into sRGB. Make sure this is checked. dial in the dimensions, and then click export all. Now once you click export all, it will ask you the file name and stuff, and you can save it. You know how to do the rest, okay? So it really helps you, because sometimes I do create my YouTube thumbnails and YouTube says that you should upload thumbnails in 720p. So I know the dimensions of 720p, that is 1280 into 720. So if you know the dimensions, this is the way to save your file. Also, to reduce your size. Also, this gives a very nice thing. If I save it as 2048 into 1365, it gives me an estimated file size, 2.7 MB. Also, it allows you to control the quality. If you decrease the quality, the file size will decrease, right? So for social media, 80% is more than enough, okay? So if you have, if a website has a submission requirement that I require this dimension, the file should be less than 2 MB, then you can play with the quality and you can also play with the dimensions, okay? Try to play with the quality. Don't go beyond 60, I would say. Don't go below than 60 or 70. Be above 60 and 70 and then play with this. If you decrease the quality, see, it just drastically decreased the file size. Keep that in mind. So that's another way. Now next, we're going to learn how to create a file. But before that, let's go ahead and take some questions. Guys, please make sure the questions are related to today's session. Okay. Today's session, guys, questions please related to today's session. Please do not ask questions outside of that. I have special time for it, special live stream for it. I will definitely answer your question. This is just for beginners. Please, guys, these just ask questions based on what we are learning right now for beginners. Okay. Guys, any questions? No. Hi, Deepak. Great to see you. Okay. Close that. Now we're going to learn how to create a file. That is essential. Go to file, simple. Let's go ahead and close it. Now, when do you need to create a file? Suppose you're creating a design, or not even a design, maybe even a thumbnail, maybe even your Facebook banner or cover. Then we need to create a file. Okay. Why does my blur does not work? I use CC 2017. It must work, or there must be a glitch in it. You should contact Adobe Help. And by the way, Adobe customer care answers they are very responsive. Just go to Twitter, just tag them, and they will answer in a minute or two. They just answer really quickly. I've got a lot of my problems solved. Go to file, okay, and then new. If you're using Photoshop older versions, you might not see this dialog box, but if you are using newer version like CC 2017, you will see this. Now it already has a lot of templates to choose from. For example, if your photo, it has landscape, portrait, whatever. It has art and illustrations, 1000 pixel grid. It is 1000 by 1000 pixels. It has web, a lot of things there. But suppose you're creating your Facebook cover. So Facebook cover has a dimension of 851 by 315. So you're going to dial it there, 851 width by 315, 15. And these are pixels, measured in pixels. You can also measure in inches. You can measure in centimeter, millimeter, whatever you want. And then resolution. Okay, here's a controversial thing which I'm going to tell you. If you are putting the width and the height in inches or anything which can be measured in real life. See, pixels cannot be measured in real life. It's a digital measurement. Inches, centimeters, millimeters, they are what? They are real life measurements. So if you put it in inches, then resolution matters, which means how many pixels per inch. Okay. So if the resolution is 300 and the width is 8.5, so the total number of pixels we have along the width is what? 300 multiplied by 8.5, whatever that number is. I'm weak at maths, but you get the idea. And the height would be 11 multiplied by 300. So what is 3300? So it would be 3300 pixels in height. They will be individual 3300 pixels, just one top, one above the other. So that's what it means. But if it's in pixels, the resolution doesn't really matter. If the resolution is even 1 and you open the image, it would be of same quality as the resolution is of, like, if you put 1000 here, doesn't really matter if it's in pixels, because resolution is what? Pixels per inch. And there is no inch. There is no thing which just measures something in real life. So if it's in pixels, resolution doesn't really matter. But if it's in inches, it does, because what is resolution? It's the number of pixels per a particular distance. okay, which can be measured in real life. So if it's an inch, which means that whatever the resolution is, multiply it with the width, and that many pixels you have in the width of the photo, and multiply it with the height, that many pixels you have in the height of the photo. That's all there is. So I usually work with pixels and never go into inches. And if I ever have to create something like A4 size, the template is already there. So I would go to pixels, and for Facebook, it is 851 for Facebook cover by 315. Resolution doesn't really matter at this point. Choose RGB color. Okay, so if you're doing anything for the screen, choose RGB. Anything for the screen, RGB. 8-bit is fine. 16-bit is a bit heavy, has more color information. You can go for it if your machine can handle that. But here's the thing, 16-bit does not allow some filters. So for just fast thing, and just if you want to apply every filter, then 8-bit is the one that you want to use. I mostly use 8-bit, never go to 16-bit, never felt the use of it. Background. So what do you want your background to be consisted of? Do you want it to be white? Do you want it to be transparent? So what do you want it to be? Or do you want it to have the background color that you chose previously? Or you can even choose a color here, just what color you want your background to be. Okay, let's leave it at white. Now this is very important. If you are doing anything for the screen, I'm saying it again, if you're doing anything from the screen, a lot of people message me that when I upload that into my social media, the colors just change. It changes because you're working on the wrong color profile. Facebook does not support Pro Photo RGB. Neither does Instagram or other stuff. They just convert that. So make sure you're working in working RGB, sRGB. sRGB is for screen. Choose sRGB, square pixels, and that's fine. Create. Karen says, hello from Belgium. Great tutorials. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Karen, for this. Really means a lot to me. Okay. So we got that. Jayan says, why I spend my money on Super Chat? Fuck this chat. What? I didn't want to say that word. Please guys, do not use curse words on here. Do not, please do not. Okay, do not. Okay, there we go. So here we are in this, and you have right now the dimensions of Facebook cover, right? So there we go. And guys, I'm gonna block you if you use curse words. I'm totally against it. Okay, all right. So for example, let me just open an image. Let me just drag and drop in one of the photos above this. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and, hey, Rick, morning. Good morning. Okay. So there we go. For example, I want to have this as my cover. Just going to drag and drop it over the canvas. There we go. So you can just make it bigger, dragging it here. Hold the shift to make it bigger in proportions. So just like that. And you want to have this as a cover, Facebook cover. Just write some text here and just go to File, Save As, or Export. You know what to do. Now, I talked about opening a file by dragging and dropping it. Okay? I did talk about that. But if you already have a canvas and you want to separately open the file, here's what you need to do. So suppose I want to work on this image but not on this canvas. So I would drag it in. I would not drop it here. Because if I drop it here, what will happen is this image will drop as a layer in the same canvas, in the same dimensions. I want it to be separate. If you want it to be separate, you're going to drop here. And here's the tip. When the cursor says copy or move, then you drop. Because when the cursor gives that plus sign, which means that it will open it up in the same document. So make sure when the cursor says plus copy or plus move, then you release the mouse and then it will open up as a separate document. I hope it makes sense to you. Let's just go ahead and close that. All right. So we did talk about everything. We did talk about how to open a file, from Lightroom. We did talk about how to save a file when you're working in Lightroom, then how to save a file, then you click File, Save. We did talk about export as dialog box. We did talk about how to export for social media and stuff. I hope it made sense to you. Now, I think I left a thing. No, nothing is left, guys. If you have any questions, meanwhile, let me just check if I've left any topic. Let me just check. While if you have any questions, make sure you ask that right now. So we did the export thing. We did creating a file, opening a file, saving a file. Everything seems to be done. Now let's talk about the interface. So the Photoshop interface. It's a little bit intimidating when you open it up in the first time. Now, have a look. Let us just go through the interface. Now, let us open a photo to understand this better. Rick says, how do you remember everything? You're excellent. Thank you so much, Rick. I've been doing it for 10 years. So it's kind of, and I love doing it. And the most important thing about it, if you love something, you just remember it. You just don't forget somebody you love, do you? Anyway, so let's just close that. And let's just open any image. Doesn't really matter. These are some of my photos over the last year and maybe this year, some photos. So let us open any image. I'm a bit picky here, but sorry about that. And let's open the wrong image because I want to show you something which I really, a lot of people have been asking me about. Now, why did I open this photo? This beautiful photo, love this photo, but there's a problem with this photo. And if you look at this photo is fine, but look at the man. He's blurred, right? He's totally blurred. Everything is in focus. Everything is working fine. Everything is looking great in the image, but the subject is blurred. It's just not working out. But if you look from far, it's looking fine. But here's the thing. Just yesterday or day before yesterday, one of my friends sent me an image of his face. Really great picture, really great moment. He sent me that photo. He told me, hey Unmesh, can you unblur this? And I was like, it's just not possible, man. Why is it not possible? Because up until now, in the history of mankind or womankind, because that's what you gotta say nowadays, there is no software or machine ever built in the history of mankind that can fix focus. Focus is a thing which, if missed by a DSLR camera, if missed really badly, cannot be fixed in software. Exposure can be fixed to a large extent, okay? Very large extent. Color can be fixed. White balance can be fixed. A lot of things can be fixed, but focus is the only thing, and motion blur, of course, it's part of that, which cannot be fixed in post-processing. Keep that in mind. Why we cannot fix it? Because once you blur something, you lose the details. And there's no way getting the details back. Come on, your machines are not gods that they will invent leaves out of blurred out trees. No, they cannot. They're not gods. So you cannot just invent details. It's just not possible. Okay, now let's talk about the interface. So Dion says, do you also do photography? Yes, these are some of my photos that I'm using right now. I'm using the wrong photos though. Yes, I do photography. Okay. Lizette says, do you change your workspace profile in the preference menu? What are the recommended settings? Lizette, very great questions. I usually make it, just customize it to the things that I used. For example, I never use, let me just show you, the adjustments bar. I just never use that. So if I ever have to create an adjustment, I would just click here and just choose the adjustment that I want. I don't use it, I close it. So I always try to minimize the things. So if you're a designer, you might want swatches, but I don't want swatches. Usually when you open Photoshop with the Essentials workspace, it comes with swatches. But if you don't need swatches, just close it. Okay? Keep it as minimum as you want. Here are only the things which I required. I require the histogram, it is there. I require the Pexels Photoshop plugin, it is there. I require the history sometimes, it is there. These are the text ones. I require this one sometimes. Device preview, it is there. Okay, you might not require this, but sometimes I do for my personal work. So I require the navigator for my face to show up, so it is there. I require the layers, the channels, and paths. Okay, I don't even require paths, I'll just close it down. Okay, so keep only the things which you require. Make it as minimum as possible so that you can work faster, better, and earn better income because you work faster, and save time because time is money. Okay, how to add moon to a photo? See, that's a very advanced question. Please ask questions. That's a really good question, but quite advanced. Make sure you ask questions dedicated to this video. Or you can, let me just answer that. Open a moon photo, just change the blend mode to screen. You'll be able to add the moon there. Okay, do some masking and stuff, you'll be able to do. The Lightroom camera is interesting in that you can change the focus. Yes, it does. I really did a story on that last year. I did a story and it's interesting. Actually, it does focus after taking the picture, but it's a different approach to that. It gets everything in focus, and the focus, that depth of field that it does, the shallow depth of field, that is artificial. I'm saying that if you have captured something, it's already captured, and the subject is not in focus, you cannot get that back in post. In the fact that there was another camera, I don't remember the name of the camera, it has 36 cameras in one camera that could focus after the fact. But here's the problem with that. The problem with that is it adds shallow depth of field later. Okay, it has a clean photo, takes the depth information, blurs the background later. But what if it's already blurred out? You cannot fix that, right? Can you? I get your point. Really amazing. That's a really good machine, but I don't know why that failed. What's your favorite way to zoom in on an image? Which color space you use for printing? So okay, let's just answer that quickly. So zoom in. To zoom in, all you have to do, press controller command plus, okay? Controller command and plus, controller command and minus. And if you have zoomed in, hold the space bar, change your cursor changes, and then drag to the area that you want to work on and leave the space bar. Or another way of zooming in, if you're zoomed in, hold the H key. I don't know how to pronounce H for hat. You get the idea. So hold the H. People say I cannot pronounce H, but you get the idea. H for hat. Just hold that key and just click, and it will become changed to a bird's eye view. Any area that you want to zoom in, just focus on that area, just release it, it zooms back in, snaps back into that area. Now let's talk about workspace a little bit. Okay, what's the shortcut for going backwards? For going backwards, the shortcut is Control Alt Z, Command Option Z. If you're using Mac, Z as it's pronounced in the US. Okay, if you want to go back. All right, we'll discuss that. Let's talk about the interface. Okay, so once you have this photo open, there is this complex thing written here which nobody talks about. Now, what is this? Let's talk about that for a second. So this is the name of the file. After the dot, it's the type of the file, and it gives you the percentage. Now, what is the percentage? It's the percentage that you have zoomed into the photo. Okay, right now it's 12.5% zoomed in. If I zoom in, it's 16.7% zoomed in. Now if I keep on zooming in, it's 100% zoom in. It's not pixelating. If you go beyond 100, if you go beyond just 200%, your pixels will start to show up. 100% is the true size of the image, which means that this is the maximum size in which you can print this photo without it getting pixelated, provided that you are printing it in a 300 or a 300 ppi. Okay, not more than that. All right, so that's fine about that. So this is that. And very important thing which I wanted to discuss is this. Time and again, you'll see something here. Okay, if I go ahead, take a brush, create a new layer, and maybe start just removing stuff here. Maybe I'll talk about it in the next video. Also, maybe I have a tutorial on that, patch 2. Suppose I created something, just remove that and did some stuff. You'll see a star there. Now, I'll say this. Beware of the star. What does the star mean? Hope you write this in your notebook. What does the star mean? Star means that you have made changes which are unsaved, which means that you have made changes and not saved it. Unless you save it, the star will still be there. Therefore, you should always keep your eye on this thing, because this shows you whether the thing has been saved or not. The changes that you have made, whether they are saved or not. Because if there's a star which you can see, it only means that, man, you need to save your work. Okay, so that's about the star. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, make sure you ask that. I have to take a break. I have to turn off some stuff because the water will start overflowing. I have to turn off my tap. Okay, so let me just take a break. I'll be back in 1 minute. So here we are back. Sorry for that. I just needed to turn off my tap because it was the water time and my tank was getting full. So it was overflowing. Kind of boring. You don't want to know that. Anyway, so let's get back to this. Now, beware of the star. Just keep that in mind. Now, what is this? Layer 1. This shows you the layer that you're currently selected. So if I select the background, it shows you the background. If I select layer 1, it shows you layer 1. Now RGB 8, what does that mean? It's using RGB, not CMYK, RGB and mode RGB. See, it's RGB, it's showing RGB, red, green, blue. What is 8? It's using RGB 8-bit, not 16-bit, not 32-bit, 8-bit. Okay? I hope that is clear to you. Now, okay, let's talk about another thing. So once you have your canvas open, let's open another photo. Let's open up some interesting photo, like, let's open up this photo, okay? So this is a small school down in the village. Right now, so for example, you're working on a black and white photo and your image, you're just having a difficult time concentrating on the photo, and you might want a different colored background. So here's what you need to do. You need to right click in here and choose the color that you want, black, because when you choose black, I often go for black and white, black or white. When you choose black, this image just pops out and you can easily work on it. Okay. Also, I'm going to give you an interesting tip, and which is very important. So for example, if you're working on a photo like this, this is my sister. Let me just open up this photo of my sister. Okay. So for example, you want to post this into Facebook, or you want to make this your YouTube thumbnail, right? But what is the background of the website? Determine, whenever you're working on something, determine the background of the website that you would be working on, that you would be uploading the photo to. If your website has a black background, work on this image with a black canvas background. If your website has a white background, work on it with a white background. Because here's the thing, if the image is too bright, okay, and the background is also bright, it just kind of matches up and the image doesn't pop up because of lack of contrast. So when I'm uploading something to Facebook, when I'm creating something for YouTube thumbnail, because they have the white background, I always right click and go to select custom color, make sure that is white. I've already set it. Click OK, and then always go ahead and select custom and then start working in it. If it is lacking some contrast, see this area, this is matching with the white. So I would go ahead and add some vignette to it, add some edge, just contrast to it. If you want to know how to add a vignette, I do have a video. Just go ahead and search for how to add vignette in Photoshop in my channel and you'll find that video. Okay, next thing about the canvas. So this is, what is the canvas? This is the canvas. The thing which your image stays in, that's the canvas. So let's choose black. This is the canvas, the document thing. Just what do you do in a canvas? You paint in a canvas. Canvas is just a material that you work with your image on. Now, on the left hand side, you'll see the tools. These tools are the tools which you will be shaping up your image in the canvas. So this is the canvas. These are the tools, just like an artist has. Artist has a canvas. He has his brushes. He has his pencils. He has his, I don't know, those knives and stuff which they paint with. Those chisels and stuff to apply the colors. Bob Ross. Okay. So these are the tools that you want to shape your image with. Now there are a couple of tools, many tools out there that we will talk about later, but this is far beyond the scope of this video. But if you really want to know what each tool does, I do have a dedicated videos on some of them. Make sure to go ahead and check that out. After tools, we have some panels. Now what are these? These are all panels. Layers panel, channels panel, these are all panels. Okay, they're just like palettes. So these are the tools in which you work on. Just think of it like this. Artist has a canvas. He has some tools. He has some what? He has some panels. He had some palettes on which he mixes up colors, on which he maintains the thing. Okay, so these are, think of them like that. Well, you can do more than just palettes, but think of them like that. These are the different, you can just set them the way you want. Okay, you can set them any way you want. It's totally upon you. Okay, All right, so we have a ton of palettes. If there's a particular palette which you cannot see, if there's something, let me just go ahead and check whether everything is right. Yes. If there's something you cannot see or are not able to see right now, you can always go to this. You can go to Windows and then open up the palette that you want. There's a channels palette, character palette. If you just need to go in depth and to capitalize something or stuff. Okay. Okay. Now let's talk about the toolbar. Okay. Every tool has a bar where he hangs out with his friends. Just kidding. To every tool, we have assigned a particular set of options. Okay. Hello, Unmesh from Norway. Hassan says, hello, Hassan. Great to have you here. The elephant in the room, palette knife. Yes, palette knife. You're right. Okay. So every tool has a set of options right there at the top. So for the move tool, we have these alignment options, these selection, these movement options, in which way do you want to move. If you're working in 3D, that's next level stuff. Okay. For selection tools, you have these options. For patch tool, you have these options. So every tool has a particular set of options where in the tool bar. Now, there's a very important info at the bottom, which most of us ignore. Okay. And this shows you a lot of other important stuff. There we go. So if you click on this arrow, there's so much more you can see here. Save progress, if it's saved or not. Okay, save. If you save a file, this just fills it up in and just shows you how much of it is saved. Now, there's a ton of things with document size. Okay, there's document dimensions. So I usually keep it at document dimensions to see the dimension of the document. It's 5769 wide, 3846 in height pixels. And then you have the timing, the scratch sizes, how much of a scratch size is using. Okay, so it's using just 297.7 megabytes. Then the save, you make sure you don't have too much of a scratch size. Then measurement scale and a lot of other stuff. Layer count. Okay, just one layer. This image has just one layer. This is very important information. Leave it at document dimensions. It's very important. Or sometimes if your Photoshop is getting laggy, if you get laggy too much, leave it at scratch sizes. Don't make sure the scratch sizes do not exceed 1 gigabytes. Or even if it does, make sure your machine is strong enough to handle that. Okay. Smart objects and sub missing, no smart objects. Okay, you get the idea. This is very important information. Also, another very important thing is document profile. So while you're saving something or while you're creating something for social media, make sure that is sRGB. It's not ProPhoto RGB. If you open a photo directly from your camera, it's a raw photo, then it will open up as ProPhoto RGB. And ProPhoto RGB, if you upload that to social media, that will change the color. So make sure it is sRGB. This is very important. This is 8 BPC, which means 8 bits per channel. Make sense? No? Ask questions. Okay. So sometimes my tool gets a bar. Yes, it does. So how would you remove the yellow vehicle? I just got on you as you were going on the break. Yellow vehicle? Which yellow vehicle? Coloring the black and white. How? Thank you so much. My sister is indeed cute. How do you edit using multiple adjustment layers without merging the layers below? You don't have to merge the layers. Just go ahead and just keep on adding the adjustment layers. Now, beginner stuff. Let's go back to the beginner stuff. And by the way, if you're into compositing and stuff, make sure you download this Pixels Photoshop plugin. This is an awesome plugin to search for free stock photos from inside of Photoshop. Okay, now let's talk about a very important thing called tools. We didn't talk about that in depth. Now, if you look at tools, every tool has a group. Okay, Photoshop, Adobe has intelligently grouped similar tools together so that to save space. For example, you wanted to remove something. For example, this is a kind of distracting thing. You want to remove it. So all the removal tools are right there. Right click on it. The spot healing brush tool, patch tool, content aware fill. Okay. The clone stamp tool is another removing tool, but that works on a completely different, it doesn't have any intelligence of its own. By the way, if you want to check out how those work, I have dedicated tutorials on that. So Every tool has been, these are the selection tools, shape selection tools, rectangular marquee tool, elliptical marquee tool, okay? Single row marquee tool, you'll never use these two. You'll never use these two because these just select one pixel in a row or a column. Never use it. You will never be using it. So they have grouped things. All the selection tools, lasso tool, polygonal tool, these are all selection tools. See, automatic selection tools are together. Cropping tools are together, perspective crop, okay? So they have just grouped similar tools together for ease of work. Now, let's talk about some basic tools right now. We will talk about selections later in the 4th segment. Currently, we are in the 3rd segment, I guess. No, end of 2nd segment. But we will talk about these. But these are the things that we can talk about right now. So this is the crop tool, okay? And as you select the crop tool, you get a lot of options here at the top. And this is what the toolbar for the crop tool. So you select any other tool, it's different for every tool. For the crop tool, this is it. Here you select the aspect ratio. For example, if you're uploading this, if you just want to crop it for a video, the aspect ratio for a video is 16:9 for a regular standard 1080p HD video, full HD, 16:9. So this is the aspect ratio that you want to crop on. If you want to bring in the original one, you gotta choose the front image. It will bring you the original one. Also, there are a lot of things that you can even define your own. So I would say 16:9, 21:9. I will choose this. This is the standard widescreen cinema aspect ratio, 21:9. And there are a lot of aspect ratios that you can choose from. Also, let's go back to the original one. And then if your image is tilted, for example, if this was tilted, let's tilt this just for fun. Let's tilt this. Rotate this, just drag it from the right. You know what to do, just same as Lightroom. Okay, we tilted that image, hit enter or return if you're using a Mac. If you want to get image straight, here's what you need to do. So for every tool, there's a shortcut. For this, the shortcut is C. How to see the shortcut? Just open up the tool on the right hand side of it. You'll be able to see the shortcut. So hit C and then you'll see that. Now next, if you want to straighten this up, there's a tool. So as I said, every tool has a tool bar. So select the straighten tool and just choose anything which should have been straight in real life. So this should have been straight. So all I will do, just click and drag to this, and Photoshop will automatically analyze that and make it straight for me. So hit enter if you're satisfied. There are a lot of other things that you can do with it. There's delete crop, content aware is a really good thing, but that's for another tutorial. So let's go back to where we were. There we go. So these are the healing tools, and this is the clone stamp tool, which just if you want to remove something, if you want to sample some area like that, just sample that and remove it. So hold Alt and click on it to take this as a sample and then remove it. We'll talk about this later. And by the way, if you want to learn this, please watch my dedicated video on the clone stamp tool. Do not get confused right now. So these are the tools, and one of the basic tools that you might use is the brush tool. Okay, one general brush tool. Take the brush and just paint whatever color you want, just paint over here. Which brings us to another important thing. Foreground and background color. This is very important that we understand that. Okay, let's go ahead. How do you change the profile from ProPhoto to sRGB? So there are two ways. While you're just saving the file, you can just go to File, Export, Export As, and then you can just check that convert to sRGB, or you can go to Edit, Convert to Profile, and it's right now sRGB. If it was ProPhoto, it would show ProPhoto, and then you would choose working RGB, sRGB, click OK. Do it in the beginning because it tends to flatten up the layers, so do it in the beginning if you want to. Hello from France. Great to see you, Jose. Thanks a lot for your time and your tips. By the way, did I pronounce your name right? I'm so sorry if it's wrong. Okay, so let's talk about the background and the foreground colors. So this is the background color, which is in the background, and this is the foreground color, which is in the foreground. Okay, pretty self-explanatory, right? The swatch which is at the top, it's the foreground color. The swatch which is at the bottom, it's the background color. So why do we have two? We could have had one. Why do we need two? Here's why we need two. When you apply a filter, there are some filters which use both the background and the foreground color to apply the filter. Apart from that fact, a very basic reason why we have this, so that we can toggle between both those colors. Okay, and there are a lot of other stuff, background layers and stuff, but the main thing which I have found out very useful for having two swatches is the possibility, the ability to toggle between those two. For example, you were working on a shade and you are shading some stuff and you working on with two shades of the same color. So you would set your foreground color, just click on that to set the color you want to say light red, and set the background color to say dark red, and then just paint with it. For example, you're painting here simply and you want to switch to dark red, just press X to toggle between the foreground and the background, then you again press X, then you back to that color, But basically we use this for masking, for removing stuff. Let me just quickly show you what that means. For example, if I was just having this girl in a different backgrounds, I'll just quickly show you what that means. If I create a mask and I create a solid color, say white, and if I select the mask, in mask you just paint with black and white. So for example, I just bring back this girl right here and I just painted a little extra. I need to paint that area with black. I would press X to toggle between foreground and just remove that area carefully, and then press X to bring back some areas, so on and so forth. Hope that makes sense to you. Okay, so that was about the background and the foreground color. So this is the foreground color. Anything which is in the foreground color, the brush paints with that color. Again, I'm going to say this. Anything which is in the foreground color, the brush paints with that color. If you want to paint a certain color with a brush, make sure the foreground color has that color. Okay. So when you paint with a brush, it won't paint with the background color. It will only paint with the foreground color. Okay. All right. Now, one more important thing. If you want to reset your foreground and the background swatches, all you have to do, you have to press the shortcut key D for donkey, D for dog, D for dodgeball, D for, I don't know. Press the D and you'll get it reset. Okay. There are some keys, there are some buttons here which probably does the same. If you want to reset, you can press this button right here, and to toggle between, you can press X, which I told you, or you can just press this button. Make sense? All right. Now, before we move on to layers, let's take a couple of questions. Color the photo. Coloring the photo, that's for another tutorial. This is just the basics. Arts Angelica says, thank you for the request. I will definitely do a tutorial on coloring photos. Okay, you deserve more subs. Julian says, I cannot agree more. Thank you so much, Julian. Do your contribution by subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for the support. Great, you teach very good. Thank you so much. All right, we have pretty much answered the questions. Now let's go ahead and talk about layers. What are layers? Layers are layers. I've already made a video, but let me just go through it again. Layers are just stack of material one above the other. Onions have layers. Humans have layers. We all have layers, right? We have the bone, we have the flesh, we have the skin, one layer above the other. And that's a similar way that Photoshop works in. So let me just illustrate. So this is the layers panel. If you cannot see it, go to Windows and then choose layers. Then you'll be able to see layers. I clicked on layers and it just went off. If you're seeing it, just don't click on it. You have to click again to get it back. Okay, there we go. So, by the way, these are the layers here. You can just get the thumbnail big by right clicking on it and choose medium or large thumbnails, whatever you are comfortable with. Okay, I usually go with large. Now, for example, you want to add a text above it. So you would create a new layer. How to create a new layer? Click on this button. It creates a new layer. Also, what you can do, you can go to layer, new layer. This is the old method. And then you can name the layer right here and then click OK. Okay. To name the layer afterwards, just double click on the text and name it. Okay. So let's name anything. Let's test. I just wanted to type text. There we go. And suppose in this layer you just wanted to add some drawings or maybe add some text right there. Educate Let's type education. Okay, just paint it up with white. Just double click on it just to select whole of the text and click on this to select the color. Okay, now to make anything bigger in Photoshop, press Controller Command T. T for tennis ball, T for tide, T for Tesla. Okay, so press Controller Command T. It shows you these just bars which you can drag in to make it bigger, these transformation bars. So just drag it and make it bigger, but it's not in proportion, right? To make it in proportion, all you have to do, you have to hold the shift. It just makes it sure that it's just you're making it larger and smaller in proportion. Hit enter once you're done with it. Now you can rotate it by pressing Controller Command T again, and then just rotate that just like that. But how do you know it's exactly 90 degrees? Again, hold shift. It will move 15 degrees at a time. It will make sure that it's the perfect degree that you're looking for. There we go, just like that. Hit enter. Now, layer is one layer. Layer is just materials one above the other. Now, layer can be transparent, translucent, or opaque. It's totally upon you. So this is a layer. This is a layer. This is the base layer or the background layer. And above that, we have the text layer. You can turn this off, turn this on, do whatever you want with it. If you wanted to make transparent, there's a tool here called the opacity. Okay, if you decrease the opacity, as the name suggests, more the opacity, the more opaque the image is. Less the opacity, the lesser the opacity, or lesser the opaque image is. Whatever the grammar is, you get the idea. So if the opacity is 0, the layer becomes transparent. Okay, if the opacity is 100, it becomes completely opaque. If the opacity is 50%, it becomes see-through, right? Have a look at this. See-through. You basically have the idea of what that does. Now you might observe one thing. Now let's understand layers a little bit more, and then we'll get into it. Do you recommend that we always convert layer to smart object? Yes. If possible, try to just keep everything in smart objects. Okay, unless your computer is getting too heavy with the file or sluggish, try to have everything converted into smart objects, unless of course it requires you to convert that into raster stuff. Suppose you want to just affect an area of the photo. Suppose you just want to do something with it with just smart objects do not support. Then you have to convert it into raster. For example, you just want to apply the clone stamp tool or stuff like that, the patch tool. In that cases, it just doesn't work. Smart objects do not work. So for that cases, do convert that into raster. For any other cases which does not require you to convert that into smart objects, please make sure that things are in smart objects. It's the most non-destructive thing. Okay. All right. So let's open another photo, because if I keep this photo open, everybody asks me to just convert that into color. So let's open this photo. There we go. Okay. We talked about that. Now let's talk about locked layers. This is an important thing which I really wanted to talk to you about. As you open a photo, there's a layer which is locked. Now, why is it locked? It's locked for the same reason while during we went to write our exams, we used to carry something called the exam board. I don't know if you carried that or not, but I used to carry that. Now what it does, it's a clamp board which helped me to just clamp up my answer paper so that they don't fly away. Have you ever used it? Or just think of it like a paperweight. Why do we have paperweight? So that the papers don't fly away, right? They just hold the paper. The clamps just hold the paper to the board. And that's the same reason why background layers are locked. Because you want the base to be stable. You don't want to have a canvas without easels, and even if you have your canvas in the easel, you want something stern to hold it to the easel, right? If it's not, you'll just paint the canvas will move and it will just fall down. So you need it to be stable. You need it to be locked. If this was not locked, we would have just messed up. Okay, so that's the reason why we get away without locking it, but it's recommended that we lock it, because we can always go ahead and unlock it if we want to. Now let's think of it this way. If I was to create something like a text or maybe a design here, if I was to just this is not a design, but just for an example, say we are just designing something right here, and just a pretty bad design, but whatever that is. Okay, we got that. Now suppose I want to move this. This is moving fine, this is working fine. Why? Because this is on its own layer. We created a new layer, we created the design on it. But if we unlock this, by the way, how to unlock this? Just click on the lock and that will unlock. You don't have to do a thing. Just click on the lock and that will unlock. Okay, and by the way, I really need to see whether is the internet working fine? Is everything working fine? Can you see me? Okay, great. Seems like you can see me. All right, there we go. So now it's unlocked. Now if you try to move it, this thing moves. Even if you select this layer, if auto select is checked and you want to move this and by mistake you move this, you don't want this to happen, right? You want the canvas to be locked. You want the canvas to be stern, and that's why we lock it. By the way, in order to go back in Photoshop, okay, you press Control Alt Z, Command Option Z if you're using a Mac. Press that again to go back again, go back again, go back again, go back again. And by the way, a couple of days ago, I was teaching a class, teaching Photoshop to one individual, and she was again pressing Control Alt Z, Control Alt Z. And I understand that. I used to do that in the beginning. Here's what you need to do. If you're applying Control Alt Z, you don't have to press Control Alt Z again and again. All you have to do, you have to hold Control and Alt and press Z or Z repeatedly. Okay, so Z repeatedly. I'm pressing just the Z. Control and Alt is held already. You don't have to again press Control Alt Z. No, Control Alt is held. Press Z again and again. There we are back. Okay, so we talked about locked layers. So layers are what? One thing above the other. We can control whether they are transparent, translucent, or opaque. And to create a new layer, click on this new layer icon. And let's just understand what layers are. So this is a black brush. I create a new layer thing and create a new layer. Just select red. And let's understand the order of layers. So right now red is at the top, but we can rearrange the orders. We can just bring it down below it, and red is now in the middle. As you can have a look. And if I move red, it's now in the middle. And by the way, what is auto select? If the auto select is checked, you can just hover over and click and drag on any layer that automatically selects the layer. For example, I just select the black. This automatically selects the black layer. Okay, select the red, click on the red, it automatically select the red layer. Click on the white, automatically select the white thing. If auto select is unchecked, this will only move whatever there is in the current layer. If you want to move the red, it just won't move. You have to select the red layer and then move. This is advantageous to have it unchecked sometimes, and to have it checked also has its own pros and cons, because when you have it unchecked, then you're sure that anything else will not move by accident. But if you have this checked, you might have this unlocked and you might just move it accidentally. Okay, so that's why I usually keep it unchecked, unless of course I really need to work fast or a special location where there's a lot of objects at different places. So that's about the order of layers. The black is at the bottom, you can just bring it at the top, right? So that's about the order. So yeah, how to delete a layer? Simple. Press the delete key and it just gets deleted. Another way of deleting the layer is that just to drag it and drop it into the trash can. Okay, drag it and drop it into the trash can. Drag it and drop it into the trash can or the garbage can. Then let's talk about another thing called smart objects. Now smart objects are, as the name suggests, they are smart. Okay, very smart. Think of it like this. Let me just create a smart object for you. So let me just, if I just go ahead, create a new layer. 85 people watching now. So grateful to have you guys. Domes Patris says, she shows me this eyeglasses. I wish I could give you the emoticon back. I think the idea is that you don't work directly on the background photo. No, we don't work directly on the background photo. Background photo is directly stern. We don't work on the direct. We should not work on the background photo. Okay. So if you want to create something, do not create on the same layer. For example, if you're on this layer and if you're just painted red or touched a lot of stuff, you cannot get that back. And suppose you worked on it, this was favorable, you just worked 1,000 layers above it, you just did this and you did that, you did a lot of stuff, but you love what you did in layer 2. You love what you did in layer 2, but you hate what you did in layer 0 with the final image. You didn't want to do it. So if you want to go back, Photoshop has a limit of going back some amount of steps. By default, it's 50. You can increase that to 1,000. But even if you want to go back, let's just go back. If we go back, we lose on the things that we did on layer 2. So that's why for each and everything, try to have it on its own layer. Okay? Because if I did anything, if I didn't like this, if this was on its own layer, I was just deleted or erased that particular area or deleted that layer. With the eraser, I would have just erased that. I wouldn't have to just go back again, right? Okay. Vikong says, you rock it, bro. Thank you, Vikong. Smart objects are not as good in CS6 than in CC. I had to find a workaround for a few options. What workarounds? I would really like to know. Please get CC, guys. You're missing out on a lot of stuff. Now let's talk about smart objects. Smart objects are smart. Now this is a raster layer, okay, or a pixel layer to be precise. Whatever I do to this layer, it will be burned down to the pixels. Okay. Now if you zoom in too much to Photoshop, you'll be able to see the pixels. Just keep on zooming in, and this is what these are, the single pixel grid. Now this image is made up of 24.1 million pixels or megapixels. Okay, megapixels just mean million pixels. 24.1 million pixels. So this image has these squares. How many squares? 24.1 million. Each square has its own color. Now everything burned down to the pixel. This canvas has a number of pixels. This canvas has 24.1 million pixels. Now if I press Controller Command T, T for tennis racket, then I make it small. To make it small, hold the shift to make it small in proportions. Also hold the Alt or Option together along with Shift. If you hold Shift and Alt together, you make it smaller or bigger from the center. This is very important, which I learned very late. This is an important tip, guys. Note it down in the notebook. Okay, you made it really small. Hit enter. Okay, everything is burned down to the pixel. Now you make it again more smaller, just like that. Hit enter. Now if you try to make it bigger, Controller Command T, and again if you try to make it bigger, look what has happened. The detail is all lost. Everything is lost. Why? Because everything was burned down to the pixel. Here's the thing, but if it's a smart object, let us get back. If it's a smart object, this won't happen. Right click on it. Convert to smart object. Okay, right click on the layer, choose convert to smart object. This converts this layer into a smart object. Now, no matter how, see the cross? It shows cross for the smart object. Now you make it small. No matter how much you want, just make it small like that. Hit enter, make it big again. It just doesn't lose the details. Why? Because this is a smart object. But also smart objects have a particular limitation to them. That, for example, you want to paint in something with a brush. Now the size of the brush is determined by what? Pixels, right? Okay, they're determined by pixels. To make the brush bigger, see, every tool has its own what? Toolbar. So in the toolbar, if you click on that drop down, you can control the size and the hardness of the brush. By the way, the shortcut to increase or decrease the size is bracket keys. Right bracket key to make it bigger, left bracket key to make it smaller. Another shortcut, hold the Alt or Option, right mouse button, drag it to the right to make it bigger, drag it to the left to make it smaller, drag it up to make it soft, drag it down to make it hard. So suppose you were in this layer and this is a smart object, let's delete that, and you want to paint over it. This just won't paint. This will show the smart object must be rasterized. Rasterize the smart object, it asks you, okay? It will change it back again into a pixel layer. Why does it ask that? Because have a look at the brush. The size of the brush is determined by pixels. Now, smart objects don't understand pixels because they use variable pixels. Think of smart objects like this. Suppose an image has 100 pixels and it's not a smart object, it's a raster photo. If you make it smaller down to 20 pixels, it will just throw away all the other 80 pixels. Okay, it will just simply throw away the 80 pixels. Again, when you make it bigger, it still has just 20 pixels. The other 80 pixel details, it has lost it. But smart objects, they are kind of variable. If a 100 pixel image is a smart object, if you make it smaller, it keeps the 80 in its pocket. If you make it big again, it just puts the 80 back from its pocket into the image. Bam, the details. So they don't understand how many pixels, they just don't work with it. They're not straightforward. Okay? Now, any questions you have, make sure you ask that. Any questions. Love your videos. Flex printing related tutorial. Please ask questions related to right now what we are doing in, because this is just dedicated to all the people who requested me to do a beginner tutorial. Please, okay? This is my request. You rock it, bro. Thank you for an amazing tutorial. Okay. Now let's move on to another thing, guys. If you have any questions regarding this, the beginners thing, whatever I've discussed till right now, just make sure you ask that. Okay, let's say I hire something so that let me know you guys are listening to it. Okay, now let's talk about adjustment layers. Now, adjustment layers are special kind of layers. They're not layers by itself. They don't contain an image, but they contain an adjustment. Okay. Creative Me says, so grateful to you. I always learn valuable techniques. Thank you so much. Hey Unmesh, I'm currently watching this My Top Portrait Retouching Tips live replay. Thank you so much for watching that. Okay. I'm sorry I cannot answer other questions right now because this is just focused on beginners. All right. You can also hold shift and use the bracket keys to adjust brush hardness. Yes, we can do that. Thank you for that information, guys. Note that. All right. Let's talk about adjustment layers. Let me just show you what that does. Just click on this button. This is the adjustment layer icon. Just click on this button. There are tons of adjustment layers that you can choose from. If you want to increase the brightness, choose the brightness contrast adjustment layer. If you want to work with curves, choose the curves. If you want to increase the hue saturation, if you want to just handle that. If you want to change it to black and white, select black and white. There are tons of stuff. Let me just open a basic one. Say brightness contrast. So this opens up the properties of the brightness contrast. If you don't see the properties, just double click on that icon of that adjustment layer. Every adjustment layer has an icon specific to that located in the layer thumbnail. Double click on that, it will open the properties. So this increase the brightness, this increase the contrast. Now again, this is what? This is a layer. Have a look. This is a layer. You can just turn it off, turn it on, increase the opacity, but it doesn't have any image. It just has the adjustment. Anything that comes under this layer gets affected. Okay. But say you have something else. For example, you have this image of my sister. Let me just open the image of this kid right there. Okay. There we go. Just above this. Okay. And everything I do, for example, have a look at this photo of the kid. I'll just make it smaller. Don't ask me how I did it. That's some advanced stuff. Okay. All right. So there's a picture of this kid. Both are on its separate layers. These are on its separate layers. So suppose I increase the contrast. The contrast in both the images increase. But I say I just want to affect this photo. Just decrease the contrast, maybe decrease the brightness. Just want to affect this photo, nothing else. What to do? Well, you can create a thing called clipping mask. So if you click on this button, you'll see an arrow just shows up, which means that this layer is just applying to this layer. Now, whatever you do, this just applies to this image. Okay, so that was the concept of clipping mask. If you want to break the clipping mask, you can hold the alter option, click on this line between these two layers. This breaks the clipping mask. You can again create a clipping mask. Another way is hold the alt key, just click on this line between these two. Okay. Sajan Datta says, please keep this video, don't delete it. I'll think about it. I really want you guys to get serious about it. Note down what is important and pay attention, because this is really important. We usually procrastinate stuff. I used to do that, and I don't want you guys to do it. Okay, we talked about smart objects. Now let's talk about adjustment layers. Now let's talk about masks and then talk about blend modes. Okay, interesting stuff. Really interesting. If you have any questions, ask that. Hi, it's not really for beginners, but I'm able to catch your live videos. Can you please explain the difference between opacity, flow for brushes? Okay. All right, I've already explained, I guess, but I will explain that again. No problem at all. Ask me as many times as you want, maybe not in this live stream. So if I create a new layer, if I take the black color, click OK, and this is indeed a basic question. Thanks for bringing that up. Edge neutral guy, thanks for bringing that up. If, say, the flow is 100%, opacity is 100%, it's totally black. It's totally opaque. It's not transparent at all. Okay? Now, if I decrease the flow to 10%, now it only means that I need to just hold the mouse or the Wacom tablet, whatever you're using, paint 10 times right here, just brush over 10 times to get it completely opaque. Because 10 times 10 is what? 100%. If the flow is just 20%, I have to paint in 5 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to get this area completely opaque. If the flow is 50%, guess what? I have to paint 2 times, 1, 2, to get this area opaque. But opacity is a little different. If I go ahead and increase the flow to 100%, if the opacity is 10 times, at 10%, if I paint 10 times at the same place, if I click and drag and just painting, it's still transparent. It's just not, it's not getting opaque. It's not. Here's the thing. But if you click in 10 times, then it might. 1, click in second time, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe a little more. So you have the idea. But in flow, it doesn't really matter. If the opacity is 100, if flow is 10, 11, doesn't matter how much you click in or do, and just paint over it and it will get. Okay, flow is the amount of flow coming out of the brush. Opacity is a totally different thing. Once you click and do it, it won't just increase itself. Did you understand it? If not, please ask again. We understood opacity. Now let's look at another thing called masks. Now masks is a very important thing to learn in Photoshop and very essential, especially if you are creating composites. So for example, there's this kid's photo, and let me just open a photo. Maybe let's just see. Okay, this one. This is one of the photos that I clicked from a boat. So you want to make this fly, just the bird. Yeah, so what do? You want to make a selection of the bird. So with the quick selection tool, just let me make a very rough selection or whatever. Let me just show you what it actually does. So yeah, whatever. So you click on the mask. So now just this bird is visible. Okay, now you can get parts of him back by taking the brush and painting back in the areas with white. Did it make sense? No? Let me explain. It won't make sense right now. Okay. If there's this image, let's say there's this image above this layer. Let's make it bigger. Let's try to understand that. Okay. Now, let's create a mask for this. Okay. To create a mask of any layer, just click on this button. The rectangle button with circle inside of it. Just click on that button. That creates a mask. Have a look at the mask. Mask just controls the area of the layer which is visible and which areas are going to be invisible. And that's what a mask does. Any area, this is important, note it down, any area which is white appears, any area which is black does not appear, does not show up, goes invisible. Any area which is white, that is visible. Any area which is black is invisible. And that's what a mask is, no matter what kind of layer it is. Whether it's an adjustment layer, whether it's a regular image layer, whether that's a smart object, whatever that is. Any area that is white shows up. Any area that is black does not show up. So right now, if I go ahead, select the mask, this is the mask. One on the right hand side of the layer thumbnail. This is the mask. If you take the brush, if you paint an area with white, doesn't make any difference because this is already white. But if you paint it with black, again, what I told you, to toggle between foreground and the background, press what? X. And then if you paint an area with black, if I just increase the flow, just increase the softness of this, see, the background image becomes visible. Why? Because this area becomes invisible. If I just turn this off, you can see it transparent right there. But here's the advantage of the mask. You can get it back. You can just paint white in here again. How to paint white in here? Just toggle between the foreground and the background. Press X. There we go. We got that back. We got that back. Okay? We got that back. Make sense? All right. So any area which is black does not show up. Any area which is white shows up. So that's that about mask. You can do this with adjustment layer. You can do this with anything you want. And by the way, I have a complete video. I think it's a 40 minutes video just on layer masking. If you want to go really in depth into it, go ahead and watch that. For example, you create an adjustment layer and say it's a curves adjustment layer. Really did some nice adjustments right here to his face and just want to apply to this area of the photo. All you have to do is select the mask and you can turn it completely black by pressing controller command I. Control and I. I means invert. Control I. Now you can take the brush, make sure the foreground color is white because you want to bring back in the layer in that area and just paint over that area. Okay, and then you can adjust the opacity of this and so on and so forth. So before, after, you can just bring in the details right there and you can just get and make it clear and you get the idea. Okay, so that's that about masking. Now there's a very funny thing, very interesting thing called blend modes. So if you go ahead and just introduce some texture here. Okay, so by the time, let's go ahead and see some. Can you please explain photo manipulation and color correction for photos look real, background change? 9-digit films. I do have several tutorials on that. Just search photo manipulation, just search color correction. I have tons of videos on color correction. Just make sure you search that. I have color grading, I have color correction if anything goes wrong. Just make sure to go ahead and check that out. Okay, and background change, check the videos on hair selection. They're great for background change, which color to choose, how to match. Also check out the video on how to match composite. That is an important video if you want to change the backgrounds. Not sure if this is basic, but Arts Angelica says that but how do you do gradient maps? Arts Angelica, gradient maps. I have a tutorial on gradient map. I have a complete tutorial on gradient map. Make sure you watch that. It's on how to take full control of light in Photoshop. It's on my channel. Just go ahead, search how to take full control of light, or just type gradient map. You'll find that tutorial goes really in depth into gradient map. Hey Pix, remember me from last stream? I asked about a shout out. Yes, I did remember. I do remember, Varun. Shout out to Varun. Okay, if you're working with smart filters, do the masks look a little different in the layer stack? I didn't quite understand the question. Let's just read that again. The elephant in the room asks if you're working with smart filters. Okay, I get it. Do the mask look a little different in the layer stack? Well, for the filters, there's a separate mask. So for example, if you're applying a filter, for example, if you are, say, applying something like whatever that is, noise or something, distort, let's try blur gallery or even stylize sharpen. There are tons of things that we can do. But let's say we were just blurring Gaussian blur and just increase it just like that. When you do that to a smart object, here's another advantage of a smart object. Once you have applied Gaussian blur, you can just always go ahead and change the values, right? You can just double click on the Gaussian blur and you can just change the values to the one that you want. Any filter that can be applied to a smart object, of course, you can always go ahead and change the values. If this was a regular layer, let me just show you. If this was a regular raster layer, if you want to change it back to raster, right click on it, choose raster, go to file, blur, to Gaussian blur, and if you just did that, there's no way to change back the values again. That's why, Lizette, I asked you to have everything in smart objects. Okay, let's get back. Let's just answer that question. If we go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, okay. For filters too, for smart filters too, we have another mask right here. But this is just for smart filters. This, mind you, this is just for smart filters. So this will only control where the filters apply. Okay, so if I click on that mask, if I don't want the blur to be applied on his face, I will just paint in with black like that. And everything else is blurred out. His face is not. So that's that about it. Okay, that's what's important here. Now, this has a different mask, but if I create a mask about this layer, this doesn't make anything invisible from the layer. The smart filters mask does not make anything invisible from the layer. This just controls the visibility of the filters. If I go ahead and click on this button, and then this is another mask for the layer. If I just paint in with black here, this becomes invisible. If I paint in with white here, this becomes visible again. Okay, so both are separate things. Okay, so there we go. And now let's move on to blend modes. Now blend modes are very interesting stuff in Photoshop. Really, if you want to get started with blend modes, I have a complete playlist on blend modes. Go to my channel, click on playlist, and just type in blend modes. You'll find a lot of tutorials there. But what do blend modes basically do? Let me just make you understand. Blend modes allow you to choose which areas, depending upon particular criterias, of course, that you choose, depending upon particular set of settings and algorithms, which areas of the layer go invisible and which areas stay visible. That's what blend mode does. Okay, so if you import, say, a texture there, so for example this texture, and you can try in different blend modes for specific effects. Okay, what was the problem that he was having? So let's go ahead and make it a little bigger. And if we try to change the blend modes of normal, this is the normal, which shows you straight away the image. Darken, this is the darken. Have a look before, after. This just, see, these areas just went invisible from this layer. What the darken blend mode does, that anything which is darker in the below pixels than this, those areas become invisible from the current layer. Overlay increases the soft light, increases the contrast a little bit. Overlay increases the contrast too much. Have a look before, after. This texture it adds. Now multiply darken stuff, screen brighten stuff. Okay, so if you really want to go in depth into blend mode, I talk about what each blend mode does. Check out that playlist. It has really in-depth tutorials on that. We are 1.5 hours past, and just last thing that we want to check out is selections. Now, what is selections in Photoshop? That is really essential for you guys to know. What are the, okay, Edge Neutral guy says, sorry for a follow-up question. What are the applications using opacity versus flow for brushes? I'm referring to when you explain the difference between opacity and fill, and for layers, and showed as an example. I did talk about opacity and flow for the brushes, didn't I? What are the applications using opacity versus flow for brushes? Applications. Well, I most of go with flow sometimes because I want to paint when I'm doing dodging and burning. I want to paint in more in some areas. I want to paint in less in some areas. But if you're in opacity, if you want to do something uniform, then you choose opacity. But if you don't want to do something uniform all throughout the photo, then you choose flow. Okay, for example, if I'm sculpting the face, making an area brighter, making an area darker, I want to paint in more, make it more brighter, just keep on painting with a brush, then at those times I might use flow, little flow, opacity 100. But opacity goes, say, 10% when I want to do something uniform. Suppose there's a logo in it, there's something else in it which I want to make a little transparent, but I usually want to keep it at a level of transparency. Okay, I want to draw something, I want to keep it at a level, keep it uniform, then I use opacity. But I personally never use opacity in retouching, but here's how you can use opacity along with flow too to really limit down the effect. Okay, I personally don't use opacity so much, to be really honest, when it comes to brushes. When I work on Photoshop, sometimes it shows that your memory RAM is not enough. What do I do? Good question. You can go to Edit, Purge, All. This will delete every step that you did, every history that you did. It will make your scratch disk clean. And this is your last resort when things get slowed down. Okay? Edit, Purge, All. Just click on that and you'll be fine. Also, what you can do, you can go to Edit, then go to Preferences, and then in the memories, I'll just open up the general preferences and then we'll move to memories. In this, where did that go? Interface, let me just find that out really quickly. There's a memory where you can really assign, there it is, performance. So you can assign more RAM to Photoshop. If you want Photoshop to work faster, if you want other apps, you want to take away the RAM and just assign all of it to Photoshop, how much of a RAM are you assigning to Photoshop? So that just you can control it from here. You can just increase it and click OK. This has a total of 8 gigs of RAM and click OK. But if you do increase it, if you're using some other applications in the background, those speed of that application might slow down. So keep that in mind and make sure use graphics processor is checked if you have a dedicated graphics processor, graphics card in your laptop or your computer system. Hit OK and you will be fine. Now, let's talk about selections and then we are through. Then we'll take up the question that you might have regarding this live stream. Okay, so let's take on some questions. And the questions are, let's take on some selection. Let's work on some selection. Now, selection along with layers are the heart of Photoshop. What are selections? Selection is something which we cannot do in Lightroom. And you want to work on really selection. So what are selections? Selection is just selections. You select a particular area, do anything you want with it. So these are the three selection tools, of which polygonal lasso tool and the lasso tool are the ones which we use the most. Also here is the quick selection tool, which allows you to automatically select. It automatically detects the edges and the color and determines which areas to select, which areas to not. Again, magic wand tool is also one of the selection tool. You can play with it the way you want. Okay. So let's quickly talk about selection tool and their applications and we will be through. For example, you want to apply a particular effect to a particular area of the layer. What you would do, you would simply, you can do this. Let's just rasterize this layer and let's make a copy of it. To make a copy of any layer, always make copies of layer. Press Ctrl or Command J. Okay. So if you just wanted to do something to a particular area, you would just go ahead, select the area, just like that, and you would apply any filter to it or do anything else to it. Suppose you want this selection to be on its own layer, press Ctrl or Command J. After the selection, it's on its own layer. So that was all about selections. You can do, selection is the heart of Photoshop. Suppose you want to remove this fly from there, use the patch tool. Just select this fly. This is also a selection. We're moving the selection to this and it goes away. Press Ctrl or Command D to deselect that. So whenever you make a selection, you are locking into that area. That, for example, you just selected this area. Suppose this is a new layer, doesn't even have to be. I made a selection just like that. I take a brush and I start painting. Okay, the paint just won't go out of the selection. I have made the selection, I have locked the area. And once you're done, you can always press Ctrl or Command D. D for donkey or dubious, Dumbledore. Ctrl or Command D. Okay, to take away the marching ants. So that's pretty much it. I think we covered a lot for today. If you guys have any question regarding today's session, make sure you ask that right now. Also, if you guys have any ideas, leave that down in the comments below, not here in the live chat, but in the comments when I leave, so that I can read that later. I cannot read live chat later, but I can always read comments later. So make sure you leave that down in the comments. And also, if you have any questions, I'm there for 3-4 minutes. Make sure you ask that right now. John Lent says, if you add a new layer, say curves, and reduce the opacity to 50%, then you add another layer on top of that, say color. How can you make the new color layer have 100% opacity? Actually, say you said, if you added the new layer, let's go through you. If you add a new layer, say curves. Let's add a new layer, say curves. And let me just do something to it. Just decrease it and I would just increase it and just increase the contrast. Let me just give it a little film faded effect just like that. And we did something to it just like that. And now, what did you say? And reduce the opacity to 50%. This decreases the effect and the intensity by 50%. Okay, we did that. And then you add another layer on top of that, say color. Okay, let's add another layer, say whatever color, say hue saturation. Color. How can you make the new color layer have 100% opacity? It already has 100% opacity, my friend. It already has 100% opacity. This has 50% opacity. This layer has, nothing else has 50% opacity, just this one. This one has 100% opacity. Okay, Lizette says, thank you, Unmesh. Thank you so much, Lizette, for joining in live. In your opinion, which is better, patch tool or clone tool? Good question. And the answer is, you decide. Yes, neutral guy, you decide. It totally depends. If you want to, clone tool is something which is the dumb daddy, but it's also intelligent. But one of the advantages of having a dumb tool is that you can use it the way you want. You can just shape it the way you want. You can do whatever you want with it. Okay, just check out the video on the clone stamp tool and you'll find out what the hell you can do with that tool. The rotation, the kind of how it is painting, the blend modes and stuff. Tons of things you can even apply to that clone stamp tool, different blend modes, which you cannot do to the patch tool. Okay, check that video out on the clone stamp tool. Also check the video out on patch tool. If you want to remove big things, patch tool is the tool for you. Okay, I'm in Australia, so there's a bit of a delay between the stream and the chat. Sorry if confused you. That's okay. I even know it's just Facebook. YouTube has a delay. YouTube actually has a delay of 11 to 20 seconds. So that's not my fault. YouTube does it. Everybody's chat, if you see, you'll notice that. So that's pretty much it for this video. Keiki says, do you tutor? No, I don't tutor personally because I have a lot of things to manage on. I go to college, I work for gigs and stuff. I do YouTube for you, I write articles. So I seldom have time for all this, for tutoring in person, but I would love to if I get an opportunity. Okay, I'll see you guys in my next live stream. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating. Thanks a lot for joining in, guys. Have a great day. Do not hurt each other. Lead a happy life and keep creating. Your images are beautiful. Love the candid expressions. Thank you so much, Miss. Thank you, Creative Me, for joining in. Thank you, everybody. Good night, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone you're in. Take care.